All righty, well, welcome. Here we are for another monthly webinar segment. We've got AI implementation, easy for me to say, AI implementation for real estate teams today. As you're getting settled in, if you'll just give me real quick, kind of a thumbs up or a hi and where you're from in the chat feature. Let me make sure that's enabled for us as well, so that you can chat with everyone. I think that's set. So a little roll call here quickly, and then we'll dive in. That'll give everybody a chance to get settled in. All right. Perfect. See a few of you are already chiming in. Maybe grabbing your lunch, your coffee. Hey, everybody. Lots of familiar faces here. Well, excellent. We got a good session lined up for today. I'll give you just a little bit of background commentary before we dive in. The primary reason that I created this is that we're building all sorts of really cool stuff on the back end of Middleton Elite Coaching. We had a number of questions that have surfaced from clients. We're doing some deeper dive training and consulting with our clients on that. We're not going to get way in the weeds on that today, but mostly because I kept getting a lot of questions. What I'm going to walk you through today is part one of what will likely be sort of a multi-part series, if you will. And I'll also acknowledge before we dive in, some of you on this call live or watching the recording are already doing way cooler stuff than what we're going to talk about today. And that's okay. We are too. This is not meant to be all inclusive. This is meant to be more of a little bit of an appetizer. Some of you on the call maybe aren't doing anything with AI at all, or perhaps you're using it in some of the ways that I'll talk about here in just a second, more as something to help you with a task than thinking about it as a way to build some type of structure or architecture or operating system behind. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. Here's basically what we're going to cover over the next 40 to 45 minutes. I'll leave some Q&A at the back end for those of you who are here live. First, the gap, which I just mentioned briefly, what we're building structurally versus just using it as a glorified Google search. Beginning to build a knowledge base based on your own intellectual property, getting the stuff out of your head and into a system, which I know for all of us can be a bit of a challenge, and it's been one we've been probably working on for years if you're anything like me. The next section is to give the framework to begin to create marketing that actually sounds like you, instead of AI slop or instead of something that your middle school niece or nephew could have written. And then the final part is some recommendations on how to create sharper client conversations as a result of what you're doing, building training libraries around things that you're already doing. These three things have been ways that I have found personally have really created a lot of leverage inside our organization. I think it'll do the same for you. Real quick, if you've ever found yourself saying, like, I've done some AI stuff, walked away thinking it wasn't all that in a bag of chips, you're not wrong. The quote AI slop that everybody references, or the stuff that it provides you that you think, man, I'm going to spend more time editing this thing than it would have been if I had just sat down with a blank piece of paper and written it myself. Not uncommon. I'm going to teach you how to avoid that. And I'm also going to give you some bonus resources to make it even more actionable. We're going to rethink the way some of the results that you've maybe been getting are lackluster. First, kind of the gap that I see, not just in our industry, but in like most people's general approach to AI. And again, some of you may be way ahead on this. And if you are, just hang with me for a second. But I think this will resonate with a number of you. The way I see most people using it is they treat AI more as a task tool. They use it like a more detailed version of a Google search, or a slightly more custom version of a Google search. They have a question, they ask it, they get generic answers. There's not really much memory or connectivity between the questions or the chats that they have, and essentially you get kind of ish results back. And maybe there's some leverage that comes from that. Maybe there's some speed that comes from that. But perhaps you found yourself like, all right, I wrote a better email as a result of it. That was helpful. Or it helped me meal plan for the week and do my grocery list, and that was good. So that it's a task accelerator is the way I see most people using it right now. If you're doing that, you're not wrong. I just want you to be thinking more about treating AI as infrastructure. As I mentioned in our spring market update video or webinar a month or so ago, I think it is the biggest structural investment, or at least one of the top 3 structural investments that I would coach you to make in your business moving forward. Treating it as AI infrastructure means that it's built based on your intellectual property, your voice, your experience. You get answers back in that way. Every task that you do, everything that you create, every conversation that you have or bring into that ecosystem compounds and gets better over time. And then structurally, it changes the way you do business and the efficacy with which you do it. That's really what today is about. We're not going to solve it all today, but I want to give you kind of those 3 buckets and the distinction here between the people who use it and the people who build with it. I'm not saying this is like some AI expert either. I'm just like a guy that most of you trust who's been building this thing in the back end of his own companies and beginning to really understand how that impacts you and your real estate teams or your other businesses that you run. Some of you may be ahead of me on this, in which case, cool, you're not going to get this 45 minutes back. But my sense is that most of you are at a spot where you see some of the benefits of it, you know there's more to it, and you're not exactly sure where to go next. So that's where we're headed today. Roughly 2 months ago, here's where I was. We had our intellectual property was scattered across all matter of things: email, Google Drive, YouTube, a whole bunch of notes everywhere. Mostly accessible to me because I was the one who created the vast majority of them and knew where to go find them. Very difficult for my team to access, even though it might have lived within a Google Drive somewhere. If you've ever felt that, what that necessitates then is that if you're the keeper of all information, you're the person who knows the most things in your organization, people tend to always come to you for that question, which is okay for one-on-one training, but not necessarily scalable. And at the time I was using ChatGPT more for like one-off tasks. And as a result, nothing really built on itself. For the past roughly 2 months or so, maybe pushing 3 months now, we've gone through the part 1 process that I'm going to teach you today. Now we've organized it all in such a way that that I think I put this in some of the promo material that I put out. I believe I built it to a level in 2 months where it's worth 2 full-time employees and 1 strategic thinker to me. I might put a price tag of roughly $300,000 worth of value on what we've built just in roughly a 60-day period. You're like, cool, that sounds pretty interesting. Tell me more. I'm a big fan of Claude. I moved exclusively, well, maybe not exclusively. I use Perplexity a little bit, but I'm a big fan of Claude. We could talk offline or maybe in the Q&A section as to why. The other platforms have the ability to do a lot of what I'm talking about today, but for context, I built all of mine there. Without regard to what platform you're using, you definitely want to be using the paid version. It's worth the $20 a month or whatever you're going to spend. I pay a lot more than that, but it's up to you. You're going to get the historical context, the ability for it to reference other things that you're building in there. You're not going to get that like one-time use and then it forgot and you feel like you're starting over every time. For me, it's got all these things that are here on the screen. For the sake of time, I won't belabor those, but I'm a big Claude fan, but no matter what platform you use, you definitely want to be using the paid version. Let's talk about building a knowledge base using your own IP, your own intellectual property. Think of it this way. It's all the stuff that lives in your brain that you've accumulated over your years or decades in this industry, in business in general, in life. The things that might normally take a team member of yours years to extract from trial and error and experience and kind of riding shotgun with you. The goal here is to expedite how quickly that information gets out of your brain. So part 1 is about building that intellectual property, building that. I've sometimes referred to it as a bit of an AI clone or an AI brain that's representative of you. There's a couple of things I'll give you here as part of the part one and the AI intellectual property piece. There's a couple of ways that you can direct AI when you're asking it a question or you're giving it a prompt. And what most people I think are doing right now is they're giving it generic info, or they're giving it generic questions. They haven't built the intellectual property backbone. So it goes out to the internet and it finds easily accessible answers on the internet and brings it back to you. Let me give you an example. I was working with a client recently who was about to launch a different style of a newsletter campaign. And an admin person on his team went to ChatGPT. None of this stuff that I'm going to teach you today had been done. Asked ChatGPT to create a real estate related newsletter based on ABC, X, Y, and Z. And ChatGPT did it, brought a result back. And by all of our analysis, the wasn't very good. You know, it was maybe a 3 out of 10, maybe a 4 out of 10 at most. Wasn't necessarily the admin's fault. Wasn't necessarily ChatGPT's fault. It was a generic question that went out into the generic world of the internet, found a generic answer, and brought it back. And that's where I mentioned this at the top of the meeting. If you've ever had that feeling like you ask it to do something, it brings it back to you, and you're like, God, this is not what I'm talking about. Like, I'm going to spend 2 hours now editing all of the stuff for the newsletter. I probably could have just sat down and created the thing myself much faster. That's because it lacks the context of you and your business. I've often described it this way. What I think about your intellectual property or my intellectual property, I think about it like a castle with a moat around it. And part of what we're going to talk about today and what you're going to continue to build on is all of the things that you put in that castle. You're not putting all of the stuff from the internet in the castle. You're putting your best of, you're putting your greatest hits. You're continuing to add to the library that lives inside the castle. Depending on how you have your privacy settings done, the moat around it both means that when you're asking it questions, it's not going to the outside world to find random junk and bring it back, but it's also protecting other people from coming in and stealing or otherwise using your own stuff. So this first part is about how do we add the greatest hits, and then how later in today's session we'll talk about over time you add more information to it. So the default stance is going to be of any of these platforms is going to be generic. It draws on the average of everything on the internet, produces average output, and sounds kind of average or generic. But what you know is there are things that are very unique about you, your business, your team, your market, your brand, your experience, all of these things that if I ask you a question right now and you gave me a really rich, detailed, custom answer, that's informed by the stuff that lives in your brain. And whatever AI platform you decide to use is only going to be able to do that if you start to feed it the things that live in your brain. So here's a couple of things that you could add in to begin building that AI brain, to give it the greatest hits. I'm going to send you some other stuff via email, or you'll be able to find it. If you're watching this recording, find it in the resources wherever you're watching the recording, or at middletonelitecoaching.com under our resources tab. But here's some things that you could begin to add. You would do this if you're operating in Claude. You would do it in the Claude paid version. You would start a new project, which you would think of that as like think like an old school file cabinet in your office. And maybe it's a 3-drawer file cabinet. And a project is like the drawer that you open up. It's not the whole cabinet itself. It's just a drawer within it. And there's a drawer associated with your real estate team or your business, if interests that you have. And so that drawer is the project. So you're just going to open that drawer, and then you're going to drop in the drawer a file folder, if you will. And in that file folder is going to include things like your business plan or strategic plan, if you have one. If you're working with us, you have one. And if you're not, wink, wink, maybe you should. You could put in there, say, a scripts book that you created, or some of response templates that you've built, or a quarterly review, or we'll talk later in marketing about how you could put marketing pieces in there that you've created that you're really proud of. Here's what I would advise you against. Don't go grab like scripts that you don't use but you found on the internet, or even if it's like scripts that you got from us but you're not using them. That's not the purpose of this yet. We could layer those things on later, but for right now, I keep using the phrase greatest hits. When I began doing this for the coaching company, we've been very fortunate that we've documented a lot of stuff along the way. We have a lot of video recordings, we have a lot of audio recordings, and candidly, not all of them are great. Some of them are really good. Candidly, not all of them are great. Some of them are outdated. So rather than just going into my Google Drive and saying like, here's all the videos we've ever done and dumping those into a project, I went through selectively and picked the best of, and then uploaded the transcripts of those videos, or uploaded that white paper that I wrote, or that blog post that we did, or that video training that we did with some coaches or with one of your teams. And think of it as, again, like using the castle analogy, it's like curating the things that you actually put in the castle. Here's another analogy for you real quick on this, and then I'll move on. Our boys, they're 13, 11, and 9 right now. And one of their superpowers is they're really good at trashing the garage. I don't know if you've ever had that happen or not. We clean the thing and then you turn around and it's dirty again. But when it's time to clean the garage, for better or worse, we kind of like take everything out of the garage and put it in the driveway. And we're like, all right, it's time to put all the stuff back in, but there's probably stuff in here we don't need. We need to donate it or take it to the dump or whatever. And then we're going to take the stuff that we know we want back in and put it back in such a way. If you thought about the intellectual property that exists in all the various corners of your business, like cleaning out your garage, and rather than just dumping it all in, you're like, let's just kind of go pull it out in the driveway for a second and figure out, like, what do we just need to get rid of? What do we need to donate? And what do we need to pull back in and put into this intellectual property, AI brain, whatever term you want to use? That's what we're talking about is going to go in there. At a minimum, 15 minutes. At a maximum, maybe a couple of hours worth of work that you're going to need to do to drop this in. Don't worry about organizing it. Just gather the best of, dump it in the project. Specifically, if you're not familiar with this terminology, it would be in project knowledge, or AKA files within Claude. So you'll put those in there and it's beginning to understand you. The second piece of this, and I'm going to send all of you, or again, you'll have access to it in the resources, kind of a starter kit for all of this. This is not going to be near the depth that we've shared with our clients on this. So if you're a coaching client, be sure that we get you all the in-depth stuff that we've done here. But even if you're not a client of ours yet, we're going to give you some things that you can work with for homework. And one of those is a strategic foundation interview. So here's the way it would go. Maybe you've uploaded a business plan or strategic plan. Maybe you've uploaded some scripts or some best of kind of stuff. But you're thinking like, all right, I mean, that's some, but I have a lot of stuff in my brain right now that I don't really have documented anywhere. I don't know where to begin to build this AI brain because it's all in my brain. And it feels like a heavy lift to like sit down and just start writing. And so instead, what you do is you prompt Claude to ask you questions, and then you respond to those questions. And that's what the strategic foundation interview is. The one we use with clients takes a couple of hours to do, but I'm going to give you kind of a base layer of it as a freebie, and you're welcome to build on that. One little thing I'd say there is when you do these types of things, strategic foundation interviews, is have it ask you a question. And then I just prefer, I'm sort of wired this way, but I just prefer to like voice dictate the answer and then have it ask the next question. I'll give you a tangential example here where using Claude speak here for just a second. This is about building project knowledge. So strategic foundation is a line of questionings that starts to build project knowledge. One of our projects, drawer in the file cabinet, one of our projects is travel. We're fortunate that we travel a lot as a family. We really enjoy it. And Sarah and I have been building essentially like an AI travel agent, AI travel assistant. But you could also imagine that like starting from zero with an AI travel assistant is a very difficult thing to do. It would need to know lots of things about your preferences. It would need to know lots of things about your upcoming trips. So we started with a strategic foundation interview for our AI travel assistant, and basically said, like, we've been fortunate to travel a lot and we like to do so. Ask us a whole bunch of questions about our travel experiences so that we can give you all the stuff that's in our brains. I'm oversimplifying what the prompt would look like, but this thread of give it your greatest hits if you have them. If you don't, give it the stuff that's from your brain. The stuff that's from your brain is triggered by the strategic foundation interview. And here's some of the things that'll show up in the freebie that I give you on this. It'll run this self-interview question series about like the types of clients and the avatars and what is it that you do and your core values and principles and frameworks that you use and what makes you unique relative to your competition. Some background about how you got here. So it's almost like if you sat down and did like a podcast interview and Tim Ferriss was the host, and 3.5 hours later you came out the other side, it would be like that, except you'll be able to run this play in 30 minutes to an hour. All right, so that's the strategic foundation interview. That's going to help you build the intellectual property. Once you've done this, we're talking maybe a couple of hours total runtime. If you go do some of these other things that I talked about, these pieces plus the bonus, for the vast majority of you who are watching this, your AI will already know you infinitely better than it currently does. The quality of answers that it starts to produce for you is going to sound way better than what you're getting right now. And you'll have the ability to continue to dial it in over time. So let's keep building on that. So part one is you're going to build the intellectual property, the AI brain, if you will. Second part, I referenced this earlier. This is marketing that actually sounds like you. I think in our business, this is really valuable and going to become increasingly valuable over time. Of note, we're not talking about AI agents today. We're not talking about Cowork today, like all that stuff that we're working on and we'll bring to you at some point in time. But right now, we're just talking about beginning to build the infrastructure that allows you to do your job a little bit better, or allows your marketing person to do their job a little bit better. I'll make a quick comment here. I think I said this in the spring update webinar, but I'll say it again. I think the businesses of the future that are going to do really, really well, the ones that are going to gobble up market share, the ones that are going to continue to thrive through all of this, are going to be the businesses that are led by AI capable and excited founders or leaders, AI capable and excited founders or leaders, and then AI savvy operations, administrative, marketing people underneath them. Now, your sales team is certainly going to need to use a lot of these tools, but I'm talking right now about the back of the house. I'm talking about the infrastructure that you're building. So if you're on this call and you're a leader of a team, and maybe you're starting to get a little excited about this, perfect. I think you should be. I think the leaders who aren't excited about this, that's going to trickle down into their organizations. Their businesses will be at risk within the next couple of years. I think an AI capable and excited founder means you're going to get in here and kind of mix it up with your team members. You're going to learn things like how this works and why, and you're going to be naturally encouraged by it and intrigued by it. So that's going to flow down into your organization. I think if you are that person and you're here, awesome. Probably wouldn't be here if you're not. And that next layer within your organization, your key ops, marketing, admin people, even sales leaders, if you have a team large enough to have that, if those people aren't really tuned in with what we're talking about today and AI as a structural investment in the company, everything's going to break down from you down to that level. I don't think, this may be an important note about what I see coming, I don't think it's a structurally sound investment to just use vendors to plug these gaps. There will be a role that vendors will play in this, I'm sure. But ultimately, I think where the biggest leverage comes for you if you're leading a business right now is that you continue to push on this AI capable and excited for yourself. And that first layer of leadership within your organization, if they're not really dialed in on this stuff, they need to get there quickly, or you need to start looking for somebody else. That's how important I think this piece becomes. We're just talking about marketing right now, but I wanted to rabbit trail with a little kind of stump speech there. So here's, again, we've talked about this already, but I'll be brief on it. It's creating generic output because it doesn't have that IP background and because we're giving it generic prompts. So what we need to teach it is how marketing actually sounds like you. But in order to do that, it needs to know what like you actually means. It's going to pull some of that from that strategic foundation interview and some of the other stuff you put in there. But now we're specifically talking about marketing pieces. As you probably know, AI just writes in the voice that you have given to it. So here's a couple of ways you could do this. I happen to really like the author and writer Malcolm Gladwell, and I could very easily just say like, "Hey Claude, here's a webinar that I did on AI, and here's the transcript of it. But I want you to write me a blog post off of the transcript, and I want you to write it like Malcolm Gladwell would have written it." And you're going to get something really good. You're going to get something that's going to sound like Gladwell. But unless any of you happen to work directly with Gladwell, which if you do, let me know, that's not going to be your voice. And so what I see a lot of people trying to do is they try to get real cute with prompt engineering, which there's a place for that, but they try to get real cute with prompting. And they say, hey, I want you to create this marketing piece, and I want you to act like person A, company B, so-and-so, this person, whatever. And that's okay, but you're going to end up with a blog post that sounds like it was written by Gladwell, not with a blog post that sounds like it was written by you. And what we're trying to do here is create something that sounds more distinctly you, because that's what you're looking for, and that's what your audience really resonates with. So here's a couple ways you could do that. So this is part 2, kind of the starter kit on brand marketing. The same Claude project that we're talking about. So you're in the paid version of Claude or whatever platform you use. You open that file drawer that is named your business. So this is not a separate marketing project. It's all within the same project, but maybe it's a separate chat within there if you want it to be. So you'd say, all right, greatest hits. I'm going to pick my 3 favorite pieces of my own writing. And it doesn't even have to be real estate related. Like maybe you wrote like some bomb ass email for a board of directors that you're on for a nonprofit. And you're like, that's the best email I've ever written. Cool. Put it in there. So you're thinking about the things that you or your team have created. So maybe it's written, maybe it's visual, and you're going to upload all of those in there. You could do like here in part number 3, it says, ask Claude what's distinctive about how you write. So this is getting into a line of questioning. So you might say, here are the 3 best emails I've ever written. Here's a couple of contributing articles that I wrote for a magazine. Here are some marketing pieces that we've done that we're really proud of. You tell it to go read your website. So if you spent a lot of time and energy building all the verbiage in your website, just tell it to go read that. You take the transcripts. I did this with a client recently. You take the transcripts of your 5 highest performing YouTube videos and you load those in there because that's in your marketing voice. Anywhere where you have spoken word or visual assets, it works much better on spoken word than visuals, but it'll read that as well. Anywhere where you have stuff that you're like, yes, that's us. That's what our marketing looks like. That's what it needs to look like. It's the same way that if you went out and hired a third-party marketing company right now, and they would spend a lot of time with you working on brand voice and looking at prior assets that you really liked, and maybe even looking at competitor assets that you really liked. And you're just going to load all of that in there. How long is this going to take? I don't know. It depends on how in-depth you want to go. I will say from my experience, the more information you give it, the better. But this is something that if you have a team member whose job is marketing, then you ask them to go collect all of this information for you. And before they load it in, you give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down on what goes in. So then you might do this. Give it a topic and ask for 200 words in your voice. So you might say something like this. I really want to talk with my sellers about how they should be listening to me more about pricing their homes properly as we get to the end of the spring market. And here's what I perceive is going on in our market right now, blah, 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 blah. And you just voice dictate all of this. Talk to it like you would talk to me. And then you say, but I don't want to write some long white paper or some blog post about it or do some webinar about it. Write 200 words or less that would be really impactful that I could send to my clients in a newsletter or post on my social media or something like that. And I want it written in my voice. And it's like, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Boom. There you go. Now you can appreciate how if you gave it this, give me 200 words about how to get my sellers to listen to me. If you just went to a generic, any AI platform and asked it that question, it's going to give you generic stuff back from the internet. You could also appreciate the massive amount of leverage that comes from, if you did nothing other than what we've talked about for the first 30 minutes of this call, you built the IP brain the way that I've described it. And then you added all of this marketing greatest hits collateral on top of it and maybe did a little bit more strategic questioning around it. And then you went and asked it to write 200 words about this on your behalf. The quality of that 200 word piece that it's going to write is going to be infinitely better than what you received before, but it's not going to be perfect. So I'll give you a real quick example on this. Many of you were on the Spring Market Update webinar. When we completed that webinar, I took the transcript from that roughly 1 hour webinar. I went back into my Claude and I said, I'm oversimplifying it right now, but I said, write a blog post that I can give to my web development team to put on the website. And it did. And it produced it back for me in a way that sounded almost exactly like I'd written it. It was so good that I only made 2 minor edits to it. And I took it downstairs and I asked Sarah, I said, I've been working with AI a lot, so you probably know I already created this with AI, but just take a look at it and tell me, does this look like something I would write? And I got the affirmative on that with a eye roll to go along with it. But that's what's on our website right now. And so if you go read the blog post that recaps the spring market update at middletonelitecoaching.com, that was written by Claude on my behalf in under 5 minutes, mildly edited by me, like 2 little edits, mildly edited by my web development team, which was mostly about removing M-dashes so it didn't look like AI wrote it. But that literally happened in 3 minutes, under 5 minutes, all based on this. And so if you wanted to, you could run the exact same thing and compare it to a generic ChatGPT or similar output on the same prompt. So you do all of this, you'd ask the hey, I need something for my sellers to get them to reduce the price and actually listen to me. See what you get after you run this Claude play, compare it to generic ChatGPT, and I believe you'll be really impressed with what comes from that. Okay, so that's the this week piece on part 2. The bonus material that you're going to give on the, or that you're going to get from me on this, is other things to build in your brand voice kit. You'll get this as a checklist with some additional commentary on it, but you'll see some examples here. 12 is an arbitrary number that I asked Claude to pick as it built this presentation for me based on prior discussions that I'd had. But there's nothing to say that you have to stop there. If you've done a lot of work in brand voice before, so here's a way you could take it one step further. So you could say hey, Claude, I'm really working on this brand voice thing and I want to do this strategic foundation interview. But I really like the work that Donald Miller at StoryBrand does about brand voice. So I want you to pretend that you're Donald Miller and his team, and I want you to ask me 20 questions or more about my brand until you feel like you have a full level of understanding about my brand at ABC Real Estate Team. And off it goes. And the only thing that you're limited by in that is your desire or ability to answer those questions. You don't have to do it all at once. Answer 5 of them while you're eating lunch and then come back to it later. I did a big project. I had a long drive from our real estate development in Tennessee back home, I don't know, a month, 6 weeks ago, something like that. And I just started a strategic foundation interview when I left East Tennessee. And basically for, I don't know, almost the whole ride home, just went through answering questions, refining things. It was asking me in voice. I was returning it back in voice. So for better or worse, I had like a 7-hour long conversation with Claude. And then Sarah said, you do know Claude is not a person, right? And yes, I do. So part 2, there's your brand voice kit, bonus material coming your way. The third thing I want to bring to you is about sharper client conversations, more specifically like efficiencies that come from recording new things. So part one was like greatest hits on broader IP and building the brain. Part two was about brand voice so that you can create marketing material that lives downstream of that. Part three is about documenting the things that you're doing day to day. If I could offer you no other piece of advice today than this, it would be record everything. Now, I know practically you can't record everything, but if your stance is currently I record nothing that I do, and you went all the way to the other side and said, I'm going to do my very best to record everything that I do. Your buyer consults, your listing consults, your team meetings, your one-on-one accountability meetings with your team members. There's a zillion different things that you can do where you're recording the active stuff that's going on. As I mentioned briefly earlier, I kind of got lucky when I started on this because we're coming up on 9 years of Middleton Elite Coaching now, and we've been recording a lot of stuff since day one. And most of the stuff that we were recording was more like for internal training purposes, so coaches could go back and watch YouTube videos, or we were doing it because we were, ripping some long form stuff to create short form marketing or whatever it was. But I got lucky that I had a whole bunch of archived material to go from. And maybe you do, and that's awesome. But if you don't, beginning to build it now, even if you don't do the things that I mentioned earlier in the call, you are having conversations with buyers or sellers every day, and there's gold in there, that stuff that lives in your brain that you're just saying to them and it's lost in time. There's gold in how you're helping your team members troubleshoot that issue with an appraisal that came in low, or the due diligence request that the other agent is just being ridiculous about. Like all of those things that you're doing every day, that's you flexing your experiential muscle, is all stuff that, if recorded and documented, goes back to feed the AI brain that later we can do a lot of really cool stuff with. I think, so here's a great example, it's the stuff that happens like between the actual appointment and when you get back to the office. So here's sort of the classic setup. You go on a listing appointment later this afternoon, and you have a great conversation with the seller. You like feverishly take notes in whatever way you currently take notes. And you remember a good bit in your brain, even if you didn't take notes around it. You have the notes that you took. And then if you're anything like me in the past, is you might come back to the office and like drop that on your listing assistant's desk and do like a quick debrief of what's happening there. But I would bet that there's stuff that you miss in that debrief, or that you miss in your notes. I would bet that for any of us, and all of you are very smart, but for any of us, that a few days later, we forgot that the seller said that little thing. Or we remember it, but we forgot to tell the team member. And because the team member then wrote the listing description, that thing that the seller said was really important didn't show up in the listing description. Now the seller sees it on Zillow and comes back to you and wants you to do a complete rewrite of the listing description, or the photo order, or the whatever it is. And so not only does that begin to create inefficiency from, in this example, the seller to you to your listing assistant to MLS and marketing collateral, like there are drop-offs in every one of those layers of communication, but it also begins to it begins to erode the client experience, because the client perceives that they said something important to you and somehow it got dropped. So they start looking around the corner for other things that might be dropped. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about how you would do this. First, I think this is a dub, but I felt compelled to put this in there anyway. Always ask permission, even if you're in a state that doesn't require the other person to consent being recorded. I think that's just a good practice. I have not seen any pushback on this, so don't overcomplicate it. Just ask. It's for internal purposes, so you don't miss anything, and you can be even more attentive to the conversation. And almost never is a buyer or seller going to say no to that. But if they say no, then that's fine. Don't worry about it. Record the appointment. In this, it says use whatever recording tool you already have, but I'll say what I have found to work best for myself is an app called Otter, OTTER. You can find out more about that at Otter AI. It's running in the background of this meeting. There's a phone-based app that you could run it on. You could use voice memos on your phone and export them. There are lots of other apps that do this. There are little devices that you can wear and the client can wear. Like there's all sorts of tech out there that you could use, but the bumper sticker here is recorded. From there, you're going to take the transcript of that recording, which you could export really easily from any of them, and you would drop it into a Claude project. So in this example, you're going to open the file drawer that is your real estate team or your real estate company. Inside that file drawer / project is a folder. That folder is going to be either the name of the client or the property address, depending on however you categorize things. That transcript is now going to get dropped in there. So here's the transcript from your listing appointment. And now your AI brain goes to work on it. Your marketing brand voice and greatest hits from that goes to work on it. You could appreciate how now, and I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but you could see it insightfully. Now your listing assistant, marketing admin, whoever goes to create a property flyer. And all they're doing is pulling in the photos from your photographer, and you've already got enough that the property flyer is being written in your voice, the listing description is being written in your voice, follow-up email maybe to the seller is being written in your voice. All the things that right now you're like, it's just like bouncing around in my brain and in this actual file folder sitting on somebody's desk, and there's just stuff everywhere. I'm not judging you if it's there. It's certainly something that I work through as well, but this is moving all of that into something that is seamless. If you really wanted to take this next level, what you could do is you could extract 3 things from a transcript, in this case, like a client appointment. So this would be like a meeting summary, if you will. So the seller committed to you that they are going to get you a copy of the key and the alarm code, and that they're going to have their landscaper come update the mulch and the whatever. So that's in their own voice. AI is creating that summary for you. John and Jane Doe, the seller, have committed to do these things. In that same conversation, you committed to do certain things by certain dates. And then in this section, we have part C would be what they said that you'd want to remember a month from now. Let's take this one step further and then we'll move on. Transcript comes in, you or your admin person drops it in this folder and then says, don't only drop the transcript in the folder, but also create a 3-part summary that I could distribute back to listing agent, that I could distribute to Mr. and Mrs. Seller. And this part C would be like extraction of intellectual property, which we won't talk about today, but hear this as like something cool that you said or an objection that you handled in that listing consult that you want to lock in as the way you would always handle that objection. You could pull that out, and now that becomes part of your training library. So there's a huge piece of leverage that comes from building this that maybe you haven't thought about yet, but this would be the internal training of your team members. This would be a sort of an AI role play partner, if you will. Like all of these things are coming. We've already built a lot of these, and I think you'll find them to be interesting as well. So here it is, every recording 3 purposes: a client-facing summary, an internal summary, and then a de-identified IP or intellectual property. So that's what I was describing. The way that you handled things now goes back and feeds into this IP loop. So I'll give you some bonus material in this little PDF starter kit that I'm going to send out to those of you who are attending, and you can find that in the resources at middletonelitecoaching.com. A couple little final things here, and then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. Almost every leader of any business that I've ever worked with has basically the same hidden problem, and that is their competitive advantage in business lives in their brain. And the way historically they've closed those gaps between what lives in their brain and what their team members know, that gap gets closed by time, experience, trial and error. What we're talking about is how do you dramatically shorten that period of time for both developing people internally and creating assets that are external. So that gets into documenting and creating, which we've pretty much already talked about extensively. Now you're building a training library just by doing the work. And these are things I mentioned to you earlier, but your listing appointments, your buyer consults, your team meetings, et cetera. I know some of you have already created internal training courses for your team members. That's awesome. We've done plenty of that as well. but I want you to think about the evolution of your business if it mirrored mine. So I use mine as an example. When we started the coaching company roughly 9 years ago, the way training looked initially is that coaches would come to Hilton Head and sit in my office for a week, or we would put together what we called coach development weekends, and basically we'd just train and mastermind for an entire weekend, and we'd record those. There's nothing inherently wrong about that, but it's a very inefficient way to move information from one person to another. So then we were like, all right, well, let's just document all of this stuff. All the coach development weekends we're going to do as videos. We're going to build these training modules that as a new coach joins us, they'll go through those modules. And then we had some platform to do that about like HR onboarding crap. And then we had some Google Drive with a whole bunch of stuff that nobody really knew how to find where it was. Like, you've probably been through iterations like this before, or perhaps you've even said like, that's a lot of work. I don't even have time to do that. So maybe you don't get around to documenting any style of training, and you outsource training, which, as a coach and consultant is not inherently bad, but there's a lot of stuff that I could teach your folks, or that our team could teach your folks, that you have more knowledge in a particular area. You have a certain way that you want to do it. So not to belabor the point any further, you could see how instead of trying to build internal training mechanisms for yourself and thinking of that as some big project you have to start anew, instead, all you're going to do is just start documenting the things that you're already doing. And as you accumulate recordings, transcripts, et cetera, of all of these types of things, you're actually building your own internal training platform. I have here at the bottom, the library actually builds itself, but that's predicated on you beginning to record all of those things. Okay. Here's a quick summary of where we are. There's really 3 things you're going to work on. At least this would be my recommendation. The knowledge base, that's the IP element that we talked about first. The brand voice, that's the marketing element that we talked about second. And 3, beginning to record conversations. Just start with 1 and kind of figure out the tech. Like, you're not going to get left behind on this if you don't start recording everything tomorrow. But if you come back to this conversation 6 months from now, I think the biggest wish that you might have is that you would have started recording things sooner, because you could always go do number 1 and number 2 later. It's number 3 that's happening in real time every day that if you're not already doing this, you're missing the gold by not recording it. Don't worry about doing it perfectly, like Claude or whatever platform you're going to use. It's going to put polish on it. It might polish it to 90%, and then you talk through it to get it the rest of the way. And once you get something locked in just the way you want it, then you document that as a particular type of protocol. This slide deck and the structure and the design of it, all completely built by Claude in less than 30 minutes with minor editing from me based on slide deck protocol that we've built internal to Claude. Something that would have previously taken me hours to do, and a lot of frustration was done by the machine while I did something else. Part 2 coming next. I mentioned at the top, like, we're doing lots of really cool stuff that we didn't even touch on today. This is like, foundational level things. And those are on your screen here. I don't have an exact time for when we're going to be ready to roll out part 2. That's more about agentic AI and Cowork and skills and all those things that maybe you're already working on as well, or maybe sounds like Greek to you. I suspect that we'll be ready to roll some things out on that like late summer into early fall, but more coming as we develop that. I mentioned a handful of times, but I'll note it here. For those of you who are watching this live, you'll get a recording of all of